The story comes to us from justice.gov. This is out of Baltimore, Maryland, and where a federal jury convicted Robert Hankard, age 45, of Baltimore, Maryland, on multiple federal crimes for providing a BB gun that he knew would be planted on a suspect, falsely testifying to a federal grand jury about his role in the BB gun planting, falsifying an application for a search warrant and an arrest report in a second incident where drugs were planted on a suspect that he falsely testified to a federal grand jury in a federal investigation, and falsifying an application for a search warrant and subsequent police report related to the search of an apartment. That was a mouthful. But those are all the multiple charges this guy was convicted on. And this is a pretty long one. I'll try to keep it short. But the conviction was announced by U.S. Attorney for the District of Maryland, Eric L. Barron, and Special Agent in Charge Thomas J. Sobocinski of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Baltimore Field Office. I think we've actually read an editorial or two by Sobocinski. Now, United States Attorney Eric L. Barron said, quote, "Today's conviction further demonstrates this office's continuing commitment to protect the civil rights of all Marylanders, including from egregious instances of police misconduct. I commend the outstanding work of Assistant U.S. Attorneys Leo J. Wise and Christopher M. Regali in obtaining this guilty verdict and recognizing the FBI special agents and task force officers who conducted this investigation. Criminals who work in police agencies violate the faith of the community, and they unfairly tarnish the reputations of the many honorable officers who work to protect us every day." Well, this guy tarnished, the badges of all those honorable cops who protect us every day. What do y'all think? FBI Special Agent in Charge Thomas Sobocinski also gave a statement. As evidenced by the jury's guilty verdict, the actions of Mr. Hankard were not only harmful to the individuals he swore oath to protect, but they also undermine public trust and confidence in law enforcement. The FBI will not tolerate those who abuse their positions of authority and is committed to rooting out public corruption and civil rights violations at all levels. We appreciate all our law enforcement partners who have assisted on this case. Now, according to the trial evidence that was offered, Hankard has been a member of the Baltimore Police Department since 2007, so we're looking at about 15 years, and was promoted to detective in March 2014. Now, in 2014 and 15, Hankard served on a special enforcement section, SES unit, assigned to the BPD's Western District. And on the evening of March 26, 2014, God, this guy just made detective, and he was not on duty that day, received a call from his partner who advised him that Sergeant W.J. had been hemmed up in something and asked Hankard if he had any toys or replicas. Hankard understood that his partner was asking for a BB gun or airsoft gun so that it could be planted on a suspect. Hankard advised he did have a BB gun. So I'm going to kind of paraphrase here. What he did was his partner came to his house and he provided him with a BB gun, which they planted at the scene of the arrest of DS, the initials, whom Sergeant W.J. had run over after chasing DS. No guns or drugs were recovered from DS at the time of his arrest, but they were recovered from him at the hospital where he'd been taken in the custody of the Baltimore PD officers. He was charged with possession, use, and discharge of gas or pellet gun, that's for the BB gun that was planted on him, and a number of drug offenses. He was detained on those charges until April 2nd of 2014, which the charges were dismissed in January 2015. And it goes down and talks about the trial evidence. It talks about the court. It actually talks about, looks like, what happened there during the search. They executed a search in the motel room where Hankard prepared a false incident report, which was approved by his partner as the officer in charge at the time of the arrest, even though the sergeant was on scene at the time. So basically they're saying Hankard was the officer in charge, but the sergeant was the one on scene. So in other words, the sergeant should have been the officer in charge, not this new detective. But they're making stuff up here. They're trying to, get a narrative going because WJ, who, remember the Sergeant WJ, he's in hot water. He's like, oh my God, I'm going to lose my job. So they basically fabricated this police report, planted stuff on this guy, including a BB gun, and then charged him with it. And this Hankard has been convicted. Now, there's no sentencing yet, but he does face a maximum sentence of 5 years in federal prison for conspiracy to commit offenses against the United States, a maximum of 10 years in federal prison for conspiracy to deprive civil rights, the Fourth Amendment, of course, and probably the 14th Amendment, right? Would I be right? A maximum of 20 years in federal prison for each of 2 counts of falsification of records in a federal investigation, and a maximum of 5 years in federal prison for false declaration before a grand jury. So there's no date yet scheduled for his sentencing, but he does remain released under the supervision of U.S. pretrial services. He's a federal criminal now. But how much you want to bet that they take all those charges and they run them together and he gets a 5-year sentence?